My brother destroyed my relationship and lied about it. His fiancée is about to learn the truth. My brother Nolan has been my parents' favorite since the day he was born. He came 6 weeks early and almost didn't make it, so they treated him like some kind of miracle for his entire life. I was 3 years older, and apparently the pregnancy that trapped my mom into marrying my dad, something she reminded me of whenever she got too many glasses of wine in her. Growing up, the favoritism was constant and obvious. Nolan got a gaming setup for his 12th birthday, while I got a card with $20 in it for mine. When I saved up for months doing odd jobs to buy myself a bike, Nolan threw a fit about wanting one too, so my parents bought him a better one the next day. Whenever we fought, I was the one who got punished regardless of who started it. I stopped expecting fairness from them by the time I was 15. When I turned 18, I moved out and got a job at a warehouse. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and I didn't have to deal with my family anymore. I started dating a girl named Kelsey a few months later. We met through a coworker who set us up, and I fell for her fast. She was the first person who made me feel like I actually mattered. We dated for almost 2 years, and I really thought she was the one. I made the mistake of bringing her to a family barbecue once, and I saw the way Nolan looked at her. He was 17 at the time and made comments about her body when she walked away to use the bathroom. I told him to shut up, and my dad told me to stop being so sensitive. After that, I kept Kelsey far away from my family, but Nolan found her on social media. Kelsey mentioned once that some guy kept messaging her, but she said it was just spam, and she was ignoring it. I didn't think anything of it. Then one night I came home early from a shift that got canceled and found Nolan's car parked outside my apartment. I walked in and heard noises coming from the bedroom. I don't need to describe what I saw. I stood in the doorway and my brother had the audacity to smirk at me. Kelsey was crying before I even said a word. I told Nolan to get out or I was calling the cops. He laughed and said I was always so dramatic, then took his time getting dressed like he wanted me to watch. After he left, I asked Kelsey how long. She told me 3 months. I asked her why. She said Nolan had been messaging her constantly, and when she kept turning him down, he threatened to tell everyone at her job that she was sleeping around for money. She worked at a daycare and was terrified of losing her job and her reputation. She said she felt trapped and didn't know how to tell me. She showed me the messages. Hundreds of them. Him pressuring her, threatening her, telling her exactly what he would do if she didn't give in. She begged me to forgive her. I told her I understood why she felt scared, but she could have come to me. She could have told me what was happening. Instead, she made a choice every single time for 3 months. I couldn't get past that. We broke up that night. The next day, I drove to my parents' house and showed them the screenshots. My mom scrolled through them and then looked at me and said, I probably faked them because I was jealous of Nolan. My dad said Kelsey was probably just a sellout who wanted both brothers, and I was trying to blame Nolan for my own relationship problems. Nolan sat on the couch the entire time with this smug look on his face and never said a word. I left and blocked all 3 of them. That was 2 years ago. I've been healing, working on myself, going to therapy. I thought I had moved on. Then last week, a mutual friend sent me an Instagram post. Nolan is engaged. His fiancée looks sweet. She has a kind face, and in the caption she wrote about how lucky she is to have found someone so loving and trustworthy. My stomach turned. I still have every single screenshot Kelsey sent me. I saved them to a cloud drive and I've never deleted them. For 2 years I told myself I was keeping them just in case, that I wouldn't actually use them, that revenge wasn't worth it. But now this girl is about to marry him. She has no idea who he really is. She doesn't know what he did to Kelsey. She doesn't know what he's capable of. I found her profile. Her messages are open. I've had the screenshots attached to a message for 3 days now. I keep opening the app, looking at her face and closing it again. I don't know if I'm doing this for her, for Kelsey, or for me. But I know I'm going to hit send. I just haven't decided if it's going to be before the wedding or during. I stare at my phone screen with the message draft open, cursor blinking after Deacon's name, and my finger hovers over the send button for the 100th time this week. My hands are shaking so badly I have to set the phone down on my kitchen counter and walk away. I pour myself water I don't drink and realize I've been holding my breath. The glass sits there sweating condensation while I pace between the counter and the couch, then back again. Every time I pick up the phone, I see her face in that engagement photo, that caption about how lucky she is. My chest feels tight like someone's sitting on it. I lock the screen and toss the phone on the couch cushions, then immediately grab it again. The screenshots are right there in my message draft, thumbnails of Nolan's threats to Kelsey lined up in neat rows. 3 days I've had this message ready. 3 days of opening the app, reading her profile description about teaching 3rd graders and volunteering at animal shelters, then closing it without sending. I set the phone face down on the coffee table and force myself to go to bed, but I don't sleep. I just stare at the ceiling thinking about what Nolan did to Kelsey and what he might do to this girl whose name I didn't even know a week ago. At work the next day, I'm so distracted I nearly backed the forklift into a support beam. The beeping alarm jolts me out of my head and I slam the brakes, stopping inches from the metal column. My supervisor Carlos comes jogging over from the loading dock, his face creased with concern. He tells me to park the forklift and meet him in his office. I follow him past the rows of pallets and inventory, my heart still racing from the near miss. Carlos closes the door behind us and leans against his desk, arms crossed. He asks if everything's okay, and I can tell he's genuinely worried, not angry. I tell him I'm dealing with some family stuff, which isn't exactly a lie. The words come out flat and unconvincing. He studies my face for a moment, then suggests we grab lunch. I accept because I need someone to talk to who isn't inside my own head. Carlos says to take the rest of my shift off and meet him at noon at the deli across the street. I clock out early and spend the next hour sitting in my car trying to decide how much to tell him. Over sandwiches at the deli across from the warehouse, I tell Carlos the whole story without naming names. I lay out the situation about my brother, the coercion, the screenshots, the engagement. He listens without interrupting, methodically eating his turkey club while I talk. I explain about finding Nolan's car outside my apartment 2 years ago, about Kelsey showing me the messages, about my parents dismissing everything. Carlos sets down his sandwich and wipes his hands on a napkin. He leans forward and asks me one question that hits hard. He wants to know if I'm doing this to protect her or to hurt him. I open my mouth to answer and realize I don't have a clean response. The question sits between us on the table while I pick at my sandwich. I tell him I thought I was doing it to protect her, but maybe that's not the whole truth. Maybe part of me wants Nolan to face consequences for once in his life. Carlos nods slowly and says both things can be true at the same time. He tells me about his sister who stayed with an abusive boyfriend for 3 years because nobody warned her about his history. By the time she left, she'd lost her job and most of her friends. Carlos says he wishes someone had told her the truth before she got in too deep. That night, I open my laptop and look at the screenshots again, really reading through them for the first time in months. I've avoided looking at them closely because they remind me of everything that fell apart. But now I force myself to go through each one, reading Nolan's words to Kelsey in chronological order. The threats are even worse than I remembered, the manipulation more calculated and cruel. He starts friendly, complimenting her and asking about her day. When she doesn't respond the way he wants, he shifts to guilt, saying she's being cold, and he thought they had a connection. Then come the threats, carefully worded at first, vague implications about what might happen if she doesn't cooperate. As the messages progress, he gets more explicit. He tells her exactly what he'll say to her coworkers, names specific people he'll contact. He describes how he'll ruin her reputation at the daycare, make sure everyone knows she's sleeping around for money. Nolan systematically broke down Kelsey's resistance over weeks, targeting her fears about her job and reputation with surgical precision. Each message builds on the last, creating a web she couldn't escape. I feel sick reading them now, seeing the pattern so clearly. This wasn't passion or jealousy. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. I find myself Googling Deacon's name, which leads me to her Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn profiles. Her privacy settings are minimal, everything public and open. Her LinkedIn says she's a third-grade teacher at an elementary school about 40 minutes from where I live. Her profile picture shows her in a classroom surrounded by kids holding up art projects. She volunteers at an animal shelter on weekends, according to her Instagram, posting pictures of dogs and cats she's helping get adopted. There are hiking photos with friends, always smiling, always looking genuinely happy. She posts about her students without naming them, sharing funny stories about things they say. Her Facebook has pictures from family gatherings, a close relationship with her parents and a younger brother. Every photo with Nolan shows her leaning into him, trusting and relaxed. The comments from Nolan are always supportive and loving, telling her she's beautiful, saying he's the lucky one, praising her kindness. My stomach turns reading them because I know what he's really like. I know the person behind those sweet comments threatened and coerced my girlfriend for 3 months. I closed the laptop feeling worse than before I opened it. My therapy appointment with Amaya is the next afternoon, and I bring up the engagement situation immediately. I've been seeing her for 18 months, working through the betrayal and the family stuff. She knows the whole story with Nolan and Kelsey. I tell her about the message I've drafted, about how I can't decide whether to send it. Amaya sits in her usual chair across from me, notepad in her lap. She asks me to explore what I'm really afraid will happen if I don't send the message. I think about it for a minute, trying to put words to the feeling that's been keeping me up at night. I tell her I'm terrified of reading about another woman being hurt by Nolan and knowing I could have prevented it. I'm scared of seeing a news story or a social media post years from now about Deacon leaving him, or worse, staying with him while he controls and manipulates her. Amaya writes something down and asks what I think will happen if I do send it. I admit I don't know. Maybe Deacon will think I'm lying. Maybe she'll show Nolan and he'll come after me somehow. Maybe she'll thank me and break off the engagement. The uncertainty is part of what's paralyzing me. Amaya guides me through examining my motivations without judgment, helping me see that protective instinct and desire for consequences can coexist. She says humans are complex, and our actions usually come from multiple places at once. She points out that I've been carrying this burden alone for 2 years, and the engagement has made the weight unbearable. We discuss the difference between revenge and accountability. Revenge is about making someone suffer because they made you suffer. Accountability is about preventing future harm and giving people information they need to make choices. Amaya asks if I've considered that Deacon deserves to make an informed choice about who she's marrying. She says keeping silent might feel safer, but it's also taking away Deacon's agency to decide for herself. That thought sits heavy in my chest. I hadn't considered it that way before. By not sending the message, I'm making a choice for Deacon, deciding she's better off not knowing. But that's exactly what Nolan did to Kelsey, controlling information and choices. Amaya sees the realization on my face and gives me a small smile. She says I don't have to decide today, but I leave therapy feeling slightly more clear but still conflicted. The fog in my head has lifted a little, but I still don't know what to do. I decide I need more information before I act. I can't make this decision in a vacuum, knowing nothing about Deacon except what I see online. I reach out to Francesca, the mutual friend who sent me the engagement post. I send her a message asking if she knows Deacon personally and if she'd be willing to talk about her. Francesca responds within an hour saying they went to high school together and Deacon is one of the sweetest people she's ever known. She asks why I'm asking, and I tell her I'm trying to decide whether to warn Deacon about Nolan. Francesca's response comes fast, saying we should meet in person to talk about this. She suggests coffee in 2 days. I agree, and spend the next 48 hours alternating between relief that someone else might help me figure this out and anxiety about what Francesca might tell me. Francesca and I meet for coffee 2 days later at a place neither of us usually goes to. She's already there when I arrive, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She remembered I take mine black. I sit down and she doesn't waste time with small talk. She tells me she's been worried about Deacon since the engagement announcement. Her face is tight with concern as she explains that Nolan has been increasingly controlling about Deacon's friendships. He subtly discourages her from spending time with her old friends, always having a reason why they can't make plans or why certain people are bad influences. Francesca says she's tried to stay close, but Deacon has been gradually pulling away. Every time they make plans, Deacon cancels last minute with apologetic excuses about being busy with wedding planning or Nolan needing her for something. The few times they do meet up, Deacon seems distracted and keeps checking her phone. Francesca describes how Deacon used to be outgoing and spontaneous, always organizing group hangouts and trips. Now she barely responds to the group chat and rarely suggests doing anything. Francesca says she's watched her friend disappear into this relationship over the past year and hasn't known what to do about it. I ask Francesca if she thinks I should tell Deacon the truth, and she looks relieved that someone else sees the red flags. She leans forward and admits she's noticed changes in Deacon over the past year. Small things that individually might not mean much, but together paint a concerning picture. Deacon checks her phone anxiously during their rare meetups, sometimes mid-conversation. She apologizes excessively for minor things like being 2 minutes late or ordering the wrong coffee. She started dressing differently, more conservative and covered up than she used to. Francesca says Deacon used to be confident and assertive, especially at work where she advocated hard for her students. Now she second-guesses herself constantly and asks for reassurance about basic decisions. Francesca tells me she's felt helpless watching her friend disappear into this relationship, knowing something's wrong but not having proof. She says if I have evidence of who Nolan really is, Deacon needs to see it. She deserves to know before she marries him. Francesca reaches across the table and squeezes my hand, telling me she'll support Deacon however this plays out, but someone needs to tell her the truth. Francesca squeezes my hand one more time before letting go, and I can see the worry in her eyes mixed with something that looks like relief. She tells me to text her if I need anything, and makes me promise to take care of myself. I walk back to my car feeling heavier than when I arrived, like the weight of what I'm about to do has finally settled on my shoulders. The drive home passes in a blur of streetlights and stop signs, my brain replaying every detail Francesca shared about Deacon pulling away from her friends. Saturday morning, I wake up early even though I don't have work, my mind already racing through everything I need to figure out. I make coffee and sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, opening a new browser window and staring at the blank search bar. My fingers hover over the keys for a minute before I type in the words I've been avoiding for 2 years. The search results for coercive control fill my screen with article after article, each one describing patterns that sound uncomfortably familiar. I click on the first link and start reading about how abusers use threats and manipulation to trap their victims. how they isolate people from support systems and erode their confidence over time. Every paragraph feels like someone describing exactly what Nolan did to Kelsey, and my stomach turns as I realize these aren't just random cruel actions, but a deliberate pattern. I spend hours going down the rabbit hole of research, clicking from one article to another, reading about psychological abuse and power dynamics and warning signs. One article talks about how people who use coercion in relationships almost always repeat those behaviors with new partners, especially once they feel secure enough that the victim can't easily leave. Another describes the cycle of isolation that starts small with subtle comments about friends being bad influences or taking up too much time, then gradually escalates until the victim has no one left to turn to. I think about what Francesca said about Deacon canceling plans and pulling away from her old friends, always with apologetic excuses about being busy. The pattern matches perfectly with what I'm reading, and fear twists in my gut as I realize Deacon might already be caught in the early stages of the same trap that snared Kelsey. I bookmark several articles that explain coercive control in clear terms, thinking I might need them later to help Deacon understand what's happening if she doesn't believe the screenshots alone. By the time I close my laptop, it's almost dinner time and I've barely moved from my chair all day. My back aches and my eyes burn from staring at the screen, but my head feels clearer than it has in days. I'm not just angry at Nolan anymore. I'm genuinely scared for Deacon in a way that has nothing to do with revenge or family drama. Monday morning arrives with a knot of anxiety in my chest that makes it hard to breathe properly. I get ready for work on autopilot, my mind already focused on the decision I made sometime during Sunday's research spiral. At lunch, I sit in my car instead of going to the break room, pulling out my phone with shaking hands. I open Facebook Messenger and search for Kelsey's name, my heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. Her profile picture is different from what I remember, showing her smiling at the camera with sunlight in her hair. I stare at the empty message box for a long time, trying to figure out what to say to someone I haven't spoken to in 2 years. Finally, I start typing, keeping it simple and direct because anything else feels too complicated. I explain that Nolan is engaged and I'm trying to decide whether to warn his fiancée, and I ask if she'd be willing to talk about what happened. My finger hovers over the send button for at least 5 minutes before I force myself to hit it, then immediately want to take it back. The message shows as delivered and I close the app quickly, shoving my phone into my pocket like it might bite me. The rest of my shift drags by in agonizing slowness, and I check my phone every 15 minutes even though I know it's pointless. By the time I clock out at 5, there's still no response and I'm starting to think maybe Kelsey blocked me years ago and never unblocked me. I drive home feeling stupid for reaching out, convinced I just made everything more complicated for no reason. I'm making dinner when my phone finally buzzes with a notification, and I nearly drop the pan I'm holding. The message from Kelsey is longer than I expected, several paragraphs that I have to read twice to fully process. She says she's been in therapy working through what happened, and she's processed a lot of the guilt and shame she carried for so long. She tells me she saw the engagement post too, because Francesca sent it to her, and she's been struggling with the same question about whether to do something. She agrees to meet for coffee on Wednesday afternoon at a place neither of us used to go together, somewhere neutral where we can talk without old memories getting in the way. The message ends with her saying she's glad I reached out, and she's been keeping tabs on my life from a distance, hoping I was healing. I read that last line 3 times, surprised by the kindness in it after everything that happened between us. Tuesday and Wednesday morning pass in a fog of nervous energy and second-guessing. I keep rehearsing what I'll say to Kelsey, running through different versions of the conversation in my head while I'm supposed to be working. Carlos catches me spacing out twice and finally pulls me aside to ask if I'm okay. I tell him I'm meeting my ex to talk about the situation with my brother, and he nods slowly like he understands how complicated that must be. He tells me to take whatever time I need and not to worry about work, which makes me feel guilty because I've been pretty useless the past few days anyway. Wednesday afternoon, I leave work early and drive to the coffee shop, arriving 15 minutes before we agreed to meet. I order a black coffee that tastes like nothing in my mouth, my taste buds apparently too numb with anxiety to register flavor. I choose a corner table away from the main seating area where we'll have some privacy, then sit there watching the door and trying not to fidget. Kelsey walks in exactly at 3 o'clock, and for a second I almost don't recognize her because she looks so different from my memories. Her hair is shorter, cut to just below her chin, and something about her posture seems more confident, even though her expression is guarded. We make awkward eye contact across the coffee shop, and she gives me a small wave before going to order her drink. I watch her talk to the barista and notice details I never paid attention to before, like the way she holds herself straighter now, or how her smile seems more genuine when she thanks the person behind the counter. She sits down across from me with her coffee, and we both start talking at the same time, then laugh nervously and fall silent. We spend the first 10 minutes on safe topics like our jobs and where we're living now, dancing around the real reason we're here. She tells me about her work at a different daycare now, one where she feels more supported by the management. I tell her about getting a promotion to lead a team at the warehouse, which feels like a small accomplishment to share. The conversation stays surface level until Kelsey finally breaks the tension by setting down her cup and looking at me directly. She says she knows why I contacted her, and there's no point pretending this is just a friendly catch-up between exes. She tells me Francesca sent her the engagement announcement the same day she sent it to me, and she's been losing sleep over whether she should warn Deacon. The relief I feel at not having to explain everything is overwhelming, and I pull out my phone to show her the message I drafted. She takes my phone and reads through it carefully, her expression shifting from neutral to something more complicated as she scrolls. When she looks up, there are tears in her eyes, but she's not crying, just holding them back. She tells me the message is clear and factual, not vindictive or dramatic, which surprises her. Then she asks me the same question Carlos did, whether I'm doing this for Deacon or to hurt Nolan. I tell her honestly that I don't know anymore, that my reasons feel tangled up with 2 years of anger at my family and unprocessed pain from everything that happened. She nods like she expected that answer, then shares something I wasn't prepared for. She says she thought about warning Deacon herself multiple times, but always stopped because she was afraid people would think she was just a jealous ex trying to ruin Nolan's happiness. Hearing her voice that same fear I've been carrying makes me feel less alone in this whole mess. Then Kelsey tells me something that catches me completely off guard and shifts the entire conversation. She's been in a serious relationship for the past year with someone who treats her with respect and patience, helping her rebuild her sense of safety. Her boyfriend knows everything about what Nolan did and supported her decision to meet with me today. The way she talks about him makes it clear this relationship is different, healthy in ways ours never quite managed to be. Hearing that she's found happiness and healing makes something loosen in my chest, some guilt I didn't even realize I was still carrying about how our relationship ended. We end up talking for almost 2 hours, and the coffee shop staff starts stacking chairs around us before we realize how late it's gotten. Kelsey tells me about her therapy sessions and how her therapist helped her understand that what Nolan did wasn't just wrong, but actually criminal coercion. She says the therapist used specific legal terms like blackmail and extortion, words that made what happened feel more real and less like something she could blame herself for. Kelsey explains that she reported everything to a victims advocacy organization that tracks patterns of abuse and helps build cases against repeat offenders. She didn't pursue criminal charges because she couldn't face the public scrutiny of a trial, especially since her career working with kids would make her vulnerable to judgment and gossip. The organization documented everything, though, and if other victims come forward, her report could help establish a pattern. Hearing her talk about it this way, with clinical distance and clear understanding of the mechanics of abuse, makes me realize how much work she's done to heal. She's not the same person who cried in my apartment 2 years ago, trapped and ashamed and unable to see a way out. Before we get up to leave, Kelsey sets her cup down and looks at me with an intensity that makes me pay attention. She tells me something that shifts my entire perspective on the situation with Deacon. She says that if someone had warned her about Nolan before he started targeting her, she would have wanted to know even if she didn't believe it at first. She says every victim deserves the chance to make an informed choice, and silence protects abusers more than it protects anyone else. Kelsey admits she probably would have dismissed the warning initially, maybe even defended Nolan, or thought the person telling her was jealous or bitter. But having that information in the back of her mind would have made her notice the red flags sooner, would have given her context for his behavior when it started escalating. She says the worst part of what happened to her was feeling like she was the only one, like maybe she'd done something to bring it on herself. If she'd known he had a history of this kind of manipulation, she could have recognized it for what it was, instead of internalizing it as her own failure. She reaches across the table and squeezes my hand briefly before pulling back. She tells me that warning Deacon isn't about revenge or family drama, or even about punishing Nolan. It's about giving another woman information she has the right to know before making a permanent legal commitment to someone who's already shown he's capable of sustained psychological abuse. I drive home from the coffee shop feeling like I've been carrying a weight for 2 years, and someone finally helped me understand what it actually is. The streets are quiet and dark, and I keep replaying Kelsey's words in my head about informed choices and silence protecting abusers. Her perspective clarified something important that I'd been struggling to articulate even in therapy. This isn't about my family or my pain, or even about punishing Nolan for what he did to me and Kelsey. It's about giving Deacon information she has the right to know before she legally binds herself to him. The question isn't whether I have the right to interfere in their relationship. The question is whether I have the right to withhold information that could protect someone from making a decision they might regret for the rest of their life. When I frame it that way, the answer feels obvious in a way it hasn't before. That night, I sit down at my laptop and revise the message to Deacon, making it less about my story and more about the documented evidence of Nolan's behavior. I delete the parts where I talked about my family history and the favoritism and all the context that's really about my own pain. Instead, I focus on the facts. I explain that 2 years ago, Nolan coerced my girlfriend into a 3-month affair using threats about her job and reputation. I include context about the hundreds of messages where he systematically broke down her resistance through manipulation and intimidation. I explain that I've kept these screenshots for 2 years because I wasn't sure what to do with them, but seeing the engagement announcement made me realize someone else deserves to know this information before making a permanent commitment. I make clear that I'm not asking her to do anything specific with this information. I'm not demanding she break up with him or confront him or believe me without question. I'm just providing information she deserves to have before legally binding herself to him, and what she does with that information is entirely her choice. I add a paragraph acknowledging that this message will be shocking and potentially unwelcome, and that I understand if her first instinct is to dismiss it or think I'm lying. I include my phone number if she wants to verify anything or ask questions or needs to talk to someone who's been through this before. I reread the message a dozen times, checking for anything that sounds vengeful or dramatic or like I'm trying to manipulate her emotions. The tone is serious but not emotional, factual but not cold. I want it to sound like what it is, someone providing information that another person has the right to know. I save the draft and close my laptop because I'm not ready to send it yet, but at least now I know what I'm going to say when I do. Friday morning, I wake up with the message still unsent and a knot of anxiety in my chest that makes it hard to breathe. I lie in bed staring at the ceiling for 20 minutes before I accept that I'm not going to be functional today. I call in sick to work for the first time in 6 months because I know I can't operate heavy machinery while this distracted. My supervisor sounds concerned and tells me to take care of myself and not to worry about coverage. Carlos texts me 10 minutes later saying he heard I called out and hopes everything's okay. I text back that I'm dealing with some personal stuff, and he responds immediately telling me to take care of myself and that his door is open when I'm ready to talk. Having people who actually care about my well-being still feels strange sometimes after growing up in a family where concern was conditional and usually came with strings attached. I spend the morning walking around my neighborhood trying to clear my head, no destination in mind, just moving because staying still makes the anxiety worse. I end up at a park where I used to bring Kelsey on dates, a small playground with a duck pond that's usually full of families on weekends. It's empty now on a Friday morning except for a few parents with toddlers. I sit on a bench watching them play with their kids, pushing them on swings and catching them at the bottom of slides. I think about the kind of father Nolan might become and feel sick. If he could threaten and manipulate Kelsey that way, systematically breaking down her resistance over months, what might he do to someone even more vulnerable? What might he do to a kid who depended on him completely and had no way to escape? The thought makes my stomach turn and I have to look away from the playground. My phone rings and it's Amaya checking in because I mentioned the Deacon situation at our last session. I answer and she asks if I've made a decision yet. I tell her I've written the message but haven't sent it, that I keep opening the app and then closing it again. She reminds me that I can't control Deacon's response, that she might not believe me or might choose to stay with Nolan anyway, and I need to be prepared for any outcome including potential backlash. She asks what I'm most afraid of, and I realize I'm scared that Deacon will show the messages to Nolan and he'll retaliate somehow. Amaya asks what form that retaliation might take, and I don't have a good answer. He could try to turn my parents against me even more, but that relationship is already destroyed. He could spread lies about me, but I don't have much of a social circle for him to poison. The more I talk through my fears, the more I realize they're based on old patterns from when I was a kid, and he could get me in trouble just by lying to our parents. Amaya helps me work through my fears about the consequences of sending the message, including the possibility that Nolan or my parents might retaliate somehow. She points out that I've already lost my family relationship, so that threat has no power anymore. The worst has already happened on that front, and I survived it. I built a life without them, found decent work, made friends like Carlos, started therapy, processed the trauma. Nolan can't take any of that away from me. She asks if I'm worried about physical retaliation, and I tell her honestly that I don't think Nolan would risk that. He's always been careful to maintain his image, to be the golden child who can do no wrong. Getting arrested for assault would shatter that carefully constructed facade. His weapon has always been manipulation and social dynamics, not physical violence. Amaya points out that this means the actual risk to me is minimal, and the benefits to Deacon could be substantial. She asks if I can live with myself if I don't send it, and something happens to Deacon down the line. I tell her I don't think I can. After I hang up with Amaya, I open Instagram and look at Deacon's profile one more time. Her most recent post is from 3 days ago, a picture of her and Nolan at some family dinner with his parents beaming in the background. My mom has her arm around Deacon's shoulders, and my dad is shaking Nolan's hand, both of them looking proud and happy. The caption talks about how lucky she is to be joining such a loving family, how welcomed they've made her feel, how she can't wait to officially become part of the family. I feel rage building in my chest because I know exactly how conditional that love is, how quickly it will turn if she ever does anything to disappoint them or threaten Nolan's image. And I know what it's like to be on the outside of that family looking in, to be the one who doesn't matter, whose pain is dismissed and whose truth is called a lie. I look at Deacon's face in the photo and see genuine happiness there, genuine trust, and I know I have to send the message. I scroll back through the photo and zoom in on faces I ignored the first time. Deacon stands next to Nolan with her hand resting on his arm, but her fingers look tense instead of relaxed. Her smile shows teeth, but her eyes look flat, like she's performing happiness instead of feeling it. I notice my mom has her arm around Deacon's shoulders in that possessive way she used to do with Nolan's girlfriends in high school, claiming them before they even made it through the front door. The comments under the post are full of heart emojis and congratulations from people who probably don't know either of them that well. I scroll through looking for Francesca's name and don't find it anywhere, which feels significant somehow. She sent me this post but didn't publicly celebrate it herself. I click over to the wedding website linked in Deacon's bio, and the homepage loads with fancy script announcing their upcoming ceremony. The date jumps out at me like a punch to the chest. 6 weeks from today. 6 weeks until Deacon walks down an aisle and promises forever to someone who threatened my ex-girlfriend for 3 months straight. 6 weeks until she signs papers that make it harder to leave when he starts showing his real personality. The timeline makes my hands shake because suddenly this isn't some distant theoretical problem I can think about forever. This is happening soon, and if I'm going to do anything, it has to be now. I close my laptop because I can't look at wedding color schemes and venue photos anymore without feeling sick. Sunday evening arrives and I'm back on my couch with my laptop open, the message to Deacon pulled up in one window and the screenshots folder open in another window next to it. I've been sitting here for 40 minutes doing nothing but staring. My cursor hovers over the send button and I move it away, then move it back, then move it away again. My heart pounds so hard I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. My hands are sweating enough that I have to wipe them on my jeans. I keep thinking about what Kelsey said about every victim deserving the chance to make an informed choice. I keep thinking about Francesca's worry that her friend is disappearing into this relationship and nobody can reach her anymore. I think about all those articles I read about abuse patterns and how they get worse after marriage when the person is more trapped. I think about how I stayed silent for 2 years while Nolan got to play the good son and the loving boyfriend, and now the perfect fiancé. I think about my own fear keeping me frozen when I could have warned someone. Before I can talk myself out of it for the 100th time, I click back to the message window and attach all the screenshots to it one by one. I double-check that I'm sending it to the right profile, because the last thing I need is to send this to some random person with a similar name. I read through the message one more time to make sure it doesn't sound crazy or vengeful. Then I move my cursor over the send button and click it before my brain can stop my hand. The whoosh sound of the message leaving makes my stomach drop straight through the floor. I feel like I might throw up right here on my coffee table. I close my laptop immediately and carry it across the room to put it on the kitchen counter because I can't handle staring at it waiting for a response that might never come. I don't sleep that night at all. I lie in bed playing out every possible way this could go wrong. Maybe Deacon will block me the second she sees the message and tell Nolan that some crazy person is trying to sabotage their relationship. Maybe Nolan monitors her social media and he'll see the message before she does and delete it. Maybe she'll read everything and think I photoshopped the screenshots because I'm jealous that my brother found happiness. Maybe she'll believe me but decide to stay with him anyway because she loves him or because she's already in too deep to back out of a wedding. Maybe Nolan will show up at my apartment to confront me and I'll have to call the cops. Maybe my parents will find out and this will somehow make things even worse between us than they already are. I stare at my ceiling fan going in circles and watch the sky outside my window turn from black to gray to pale blue. Monday morning comes and there's still no response from Deacon when I check my phone. I drag myself to work running on zero sleep and pure anxiety that feels like it's eating me from the inside. Carlos takes one look at my face when I walk in and asks what happened. I tell him I sent the message last night, and now I'm stuck in this horrible place of not knowing if I did the right thing or just made everything 10 times worse. He tells me I did what I could and now I have to let it go, which sounds nice but doesn't actually help. By Tuesday afternoon, I've checked my Instagram messages something like 300 times, and there's still nothing from Deacon. I start wondering if she even saw the message at all. Maybe it went to her message requests folder, and she never looks at those. Maybe Nolan does monitor her accounts and he intercepted it somehow before she could see it. The not knowing is almost worse than any actual response would be, because at least a response would tell me something. Wednesday evening, I'm making dinner and trying not to think about my phone when it buzzes on the counter next to me. I'm holding a knife cutting vegetables and my hands shake so badly I almost drop it on my foot. I grab my phone and see an Instagram notification from Deacon. The message is short, and my stomach drops reading it. She wrote that she needs time to process everything, and she's asking me not to contact her again unless she reaches out first. I read it 5 times trying to figure out if that's good or bad. Does needing time mean she believes me or that she thinks I'm lying? Does asking me not to contact her mean she's taking it seriously or that she wants me to leave her alone forever? I respect her request and don't respond, even though every part of me wants to send another message explaining more or asking if she's okay. I'm climbing the walls with anxiety about what's happening on her end of this. Is she confronting Nolan right now? Is she showing the screenshots to her parents or friends to get their opinion? Is she dismissing everything as fake and blocking me? I have no way of knowing anything, and the powerlessness makes me want to punch something. Thursday night, I'm microwaving leftovers and trying not to check my phone every 30 seconds when it rings with Francesca's name on the screen. I answer before the second ring, and her voice comes through urgent and a little out of breath. She tells me Deacon reached out to her this afternoon, asking if they could meet up tomorrow, which is the first time Deacon has made plans with her in months. Francesca sounds excited but cautious, like she's trying not to get her hopes up too high. She says Deacon didn't mention anything specific about why she wants to meet, but Francesca is pretty sure my message is the reason. She wanted to give me a heads up before they get together in case Deacon brings it up directly. I thank her for letting me know, and then ask her to please not push Deacon in any direction when they meet. Just be there as a supportive friend and listen to whatever she needs to say. Francesca agrees immediately, but then adds that she's been waiting months for an opening to talk to Deacon about the concerns she's been having, and this might finally be her chance. She promises to call me after they meet if there's anything I need to know about how Deacon is handling everything. We hang up and I stand in my kitchen with my food getting cold on the counter because I completely forgot about eating. The next day at work is absolute torture, and I can't focus on anything Carlos is saying during the morning briefing. He keeps having to repeat instructions, and finally around noon he pulls me aside and tells me I'm a safety hazard in this state. He sends me home early and I don't even argue because he's right. I drive back to my apartment and turn on the TV, but nothing holds my attention for more than 5 minutes. My phone sits on the coffee table in front of me, completely silent all afternoon and into the evening. I order pizza around 7, but only eat 2 slices before giving up. At 9 p.m., my phone finally rings and I grab it so fast I almost drop it on the floor. Francesca's voice comes through quiet and careful, like she's somewhere she might be overheard. She tells me she just left the coffee shop where she spent the last 3 hours with Deacon, and it was intense. Deacon broke down crying multiple times while reading through the screenshots on Francesca's phone because she didn't want to look at them on her own device where Nolan might see them later. Francesca says Deacon admitted that Nolan has been showing controlling behaviors lately, but she's been making excuses for all of them, telling herself she was being too sensitive or that he was just stressed about wedding planning. Francesca's voice gets even quieter as she tells me about the specific things Deacon shared. Nolan has been getting angry whenever Deacon makes plans with friends or family without telling him first, like she needs his permission to have a life outside their relationship. He's been checking her phone when she's in the shower, and Deacon found out because he accidentally moved some apps around and didn't put them back exactly where they were. He makes subtle negative comments about her friends and family, nothing obvious enough that she could call him out on it, but enough that she's been feeling guilty about spending time with the people who care about her. Deacon told Francesca that reading through those screenshots felt like looking at a blueprint of her own relationship, just further along the timeline. The manipulation patterns were exactly the same as what she's been experiencing, only with Kelsey they were more intense because the relationship had progressed further. I ask Francesca if Deacon is safe right now, and if she's planning to confront Nolan, because I'm worried about how he might react to being exposed like this. Francesca tells me Deacon is staying at her parents' house tonight, and she's already talked to her brother Roger about being present when she confronts Nolan tomorrow. She's not going to break off the engagement over text or phone because she wants to see his face when she shows him the evidence, wants to watch him try to lie his way out of it. Francesca sounds proud of Deacon for being that strong, and I feel a weird mix of relief and anxiety about what's going to happen. Saturday morning feels completely surreal as I go through my normal routine of making coffee and eating breakfast while knowing that somewhere across town, Deacon is probably getting ready to confront Nolan with 2 years' worth of evidence about what kind of person he really is. I keep my phone on loud volume all day and jump every single time it buzzes with a notification that turns out to be some spam email or app update. I try to watch a movie but give up after 20 minutes because I can't follow the plot. I clean my apartment even though it doesn't need it just to have something to do with my hands. Late Saturday afternoon, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize, and my heart jumps into my throat as I answer it. A male voice asks if this is me, and then introduces himself as Roger Bradshaw, Deacon's brother. He says Deacon asked him to call and let me know that she confronted Nolan this afternoon with both their parents and him present as witnesses, and the engagement is officially over. Roger's voice is steady, but I can hear the anger underneath it as he tells me what happened. Nolan tried to deny everything at first and claimed the screenshots were fabricated, that I must have photoshopped them or something, because I was jealous of his relationship. Roger says Deacon just kept showing him message after message, hundreds of them with dates and times and specific details that would have been impossible to fake. Nolan eventually broke down and admitted it was all real, but tried to minimize it as just a mistake from years ago when he was younger and stupider. Deacon wasn't hearing any of it. She gave back the ring right there in front of everyone and told Nolan that if he ever contacts her again through any method, she'll file for a restraining order immediately. I ask Roger how Deacon is doing, and he says she's devastated, but also relieved in a weird way that she's still trying to process. She's angry at herself for not seeing the warning signs sooner, for making excuses for behavior that should have been obvious red flags. Roger tells me his whole family is grateful to me for caring enough about a stranger to send that message, and hearing that from people I've never even met feels overwhelming in a way I can't quite describe. Roger asks if I'd be willing to talk to Deacon directly at some point when she's ready, because she has questions about Kelsey and what happened. I tell him I'm willing to answer anything she wants to know, and to have Deacon reach out whenever she feels up to it. He thanks me again before hanging up, his voice thick with something that sounds like gratitude mixed with anger at my brother. I sit on my couch after the call ends, staring at the dark TV screen and feeling a complicated mix of relief and sadness and leftover anger that doesn't have anywhere to go now. I did what I set out to do, and Deacon is safe from making a terrible mistake, but there's no triumph in it, just a hollow feeling of something finally being finished, like closing a book I never wanted to read in the first place. I get up and pour myself a glass of water I don't really want, then walk to the window and look out at the parking lot where nothing interesting is happening. My hands are still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of Roger's call, and I realize I've been holding tension in my shoulders for what feels like days. Sunday morning, I wake up to find a notification on my phone from Instagram, and my stomach drops before I even open it. Deacon has sent me a direct message, a long paragraph thanking me for sending the screenshots despite knowing I'd be opening myself up to potential backlash from my family. She says she's been going through her relationship with Nolan in her head, seeing all the red flags she missed or explained away because she wanted to believe he was the person he pretended to be. She asks if I'd be willing to talk on the phone sometime this week, saying she has questions about the timeline and how everything happened with Kelsey. I respond within minutes, telling her I'm available whenever works for her schedule. We go back and forth a few times, working out the details, and we settle on Tuesday evening around 7. I spend the next 2 days feeling nervous about the conversation, wondering what exactly she wants to know and whether I'll be able to explain everything in a way that makes sense. Tuesday evening arrives and my phone rings at exactly 7 o'clock, Deacon's number showing up on the screen. I answer and her voice sounds tired but steady, like she's been crying recently but has pulled herself together for this call. She starts by thanking me again, then jumps right into her questions about the timeline of events with Kelsey and how long the coercion went on before I discovered it. She's trying to understand the pattern of how Nolan operates, what warning signs she should have caught earlier in her own relationship. I answer everything honestly, including the parts that make me look bad for not seeing what was happening sooner, for not recognizing that Kelsey was threatened until it was too late. Deacon listens without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of understanding or agreement. Then she tells me something that makes my blood run cold and my grip tighten on the phone. Nolan had been pressuring her to cut contact with Francesca and her other high school friends, saying they were jealous of their relationship and trying to cause problems between them. She'd been slowly pulling away from her support system exactly like he wanted, making excuses about being busy with wedding planning whenever they tried to make plans. If the engagement had gone forward, she would have been increasingly isolated from everyone who cared about her and might have noticed the abuse. She also reveals that Nolan had been pushing for her to add him to her bank accounts and credit cards before the wedding, saying married couples should have complete financial transparency and no secrets from each other. Her parents had advised against it, which caused tension between Nolan and the Bradshaw family over the past few months. She realizes now he was setting up ways to control her financially, making it harder for her to leave if things got worse after they were married. We talk for over an hour, and by the end of the conversation, Deacon sounds stronger and more clear-headed than she did at the beginning. She says she's starting therapy this week to process everything and learn to trust her instincts again, to stop second-guessing herself when something feels wrong. She asks if she can contact Kelsey to apologize for what Nolan put her through, and I tell her I'll ask Kelsey if she's open to that conversation. I reach out to Kelsey later that night and explain the situation, and she responds the next morning saying she'd be willing to talk to Deacon if it would help her healing process. She says she doesn't need an apology because Deacon didn't do anything wrong, but she's happy to share her experience if it's useful for Deacon to hear from someone else who went through the same thing. I connect them via email and step back to let them communicate directly, figuring they don't need me involved in that conversation. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the Bradshaw house, Francesca calls me with an update. She says Deacon is doing much better and has been reconnecting with all the friends she'd been drifting away from over the past year. The Bradshaw family has been incredibly supportive, surrounding Deacon with love and validation instead of judgment. Francesca mentions that Deacon's parents told her they'd had reservations about Nolan, but didn't want to interfere in her choices or seem controlling. Now they're glad someone gave her the information she needed to make an informed decision about her future. I hear through Francesca a few days later that my parents are furious about the broken engagement and have been calling Deacon's family trying to defend Nolan and blame me for ruining his happiness. The Bradshaws shut that down immediately and told my parents they raised a predator who threatened and manipulated young women. Hearing that someone finally held my parents accountable for their favoritism and their willful blindness about who Nolan really is gives me a feeling I can't quite name. Something between satisfaction and sadness that it took this long for anyone to say it out loud. I walk into Amaya's office the following week, and she can tell something's different before I even sit down. She asks how I'm feeling, and I tell her relieved but also kind of empty, like I've been carrying something heavy for so long that now my arms don't know what to do without the weight. We spend the session talking about what happened with Deacon and the Bradshaws, and Amaya helps me work through the complicated feelings I have about my parents still defending Nolan, even after everything came out. She points out that I've been waiting for them to admit they were wrong about him, to acknowledge that I was telling the truth 2 years ago, but that validation might never come. She says the important thing is that I know I did the right thing, that I protected someone from harm even though it cost me my relationship with my family. The validation doesn't have to come from them. It can come from knowing I made a choice based on what was right instead of what was easy or comfortable. We talk about how growth sometimes looks like accepting that closure doesn't always arrive in the package we expect, and that healing means moving forward even when the people who hurt us never apologize or change. By the end of the session, I feel lighter somehow, like I've been given permission to stop waiting for my parents to become different people. A month passes, and I'm at the warehouse unloading a truck when my phone buzzes in my pocket. I don't recognize the number, but the area code is local, so I step outside to check it during my break. The text says it's Deacon, and she wanted to give me an update about something that happened. She explains that she reached out to Kelsey a few weeks ago, and they met for coffee last weekend to talk about their experiences with Nolan. Deacon says the conversation was really helpful for both of them, that talking to someone else who understood what it felt like to be manipulated and threatened made her feel less alone in what she went through. They spent hours sharing their stories and realizing how similar Nolan's tactics were with both of them. The same patterns of isolation and control, just applied in slightly different ways. At the end of the text, Deacon mentions that she and Kelsey have decided to volunteer together with a local group that helps victims of relationship abuse, turning what happened to them into something that might help other people recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Reading that makes me feel something I wasn't expecting, like maybe all the pain and messiness of the past 2 years led to something meaningful after all. The next message from Deacon comes through a few seconds later, and it's longer than the first. She writes that what I did took real courage, sending those screenshots to a stranger knowing I might face backlash, or that she might not believe me. She says she's thought a lot about the fact that I had nothing to gain from warning her and everything to lose if Nolan or my parents found out and retaliated somehow. She tells me she's talked to her therapist about the timeline of how things could have gone if I hadn't sent that message. And she's pretty sure she would have married Nolan and spent years in an increasingly bad situation before she found the strength to leave. She says she's moving forward now, surrounded by people who genuinely care about her. People like Francesca and her family who want her to be happy and safe instead of controlled. She's learning to recognize the difference between real love and the kind of attention that looks like love, but is actually about power and ownership. The text ends with her wishing me peace and healing, thanking me one more time for caring enough about a stranger's safety to do something hard and uncomfortable. She says she hopes I know that what I did mattered, that it probably saved her from years of pain, and that she'll always be grateful I chose to speak up instead of staying silent. 6 weeks after everything went down, I'm sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee, looking out the window at people walking their dogs and kids riding bikes on the sidewalk. The sun is coming through the blinds and hitting the wall in a way that makes the whole room feel warm and quiet. I realize I feel something close to peace for the first time in 2 years. Not the kind of peace where everything is perfect and resolved, but the kind where you accept that some things won't ever be fixed, and that's okay. I didn't get my family back, and I probably never will. Nolan will most likely never face real legal trouble for what he did to Kelsey and Deacon, just a broken engagement and a damaged reputation in certain circles. My parents will keep defending him and blaming me because that's easier than admitting they raised someone capable of hurting people the way he did. But Deacon is safe. She got out before she married him and lost even more of herself to his control. Kelsey got some closure by connecting with someone who understood what she went through, and they're both using their experiences to help other people now. And I learned something important about myself, that I'm capable of doing hard things even when the outcome is uncertain and the cost is high. My therapist told me at our last session that growth looks like this sometimes, messy and incomplete, but still moving forward. I'm starting to believe her.